Detective Maria Santos had seen her share of crime scenes in her 15-year career with the Montgomery Police Department, but nothing quite prepared her for the chaos that greeted her at 2847 Maple Street on that humid Alabama evening in March 2019. The call had come in at 11:47 p.m. Home invasion with injuries, possible kidnapping, child witness on scene. As she pulled up to the modest ranch-style house, the flashing red and blue lights from 6 patrol cars painted the neighborhood in an eerie, apocalyptic glow. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the warm breeze, like warning flags as Santos stepped out of her unmarked sedan. The Rodriguez home, usually a picture of suburban tranquility, with its well-maintained garden and cheerful yellow shutters, now looked like a war zone. The front door hung askew on its hinges, splintered wood scattered across the porch, where the intruder had apparently kicked it in with tremendous force. "What do we have, Officer Martinez?" Santos asked the first responder, a young patrolman she'd worked with before. "Brutal home invasion, detective." Elderly woman, Carmen Rodriguez, age 73, was beaten unconscious with what appears to be a baseball bat. She's at Montgomery General in critical condition. The family's safe was cracked open. Looks like they got away with about $15,000 in cash the family had been saving for a new car. Santos surveyed the destruction as Martinez continued his briefing. Furniture was overturned. Family photographs lay shattered on the hardwood floor, and there were signs of a desperate struggle throughout the living room. A trail of blood led from the kitchen to the front door, telling the grim story of Carmen Rodriguez's final moments of consciousness. "The granddaughter was here when it happened," Martinez continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez. "We found her hiding in the bedroom closet about 20 minutes ago. She won't come out for anyone except her mother, who just arrived from her night shift at the hospital." Santos felt her stomach drop. Child witnesses were always the hardest part of her job, especially in violent crimes. She'd seen how trauma could shatter young minds, leaving invisible scars that lasted lifetimes. But she also knew that children often noticed details adults missed, details that could make or break a case. As she approached the house, the magnitude of the destruction became even more apparent. The living room looked like a tornado had torn through it. The family's television lay face down on the carpet, its screen spider-webbed with cracks. A bookshelf had been toppled, spilling children's books and family mementos across the floor. Picture frames containing images of happier times, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduation ceremonies, now lay broken and scattered like shattered dreams. The kitchen told an even more disturbing story. Drawers had been yanked out and emptied, their contents scattered as the intruder searched for valuables. A chair was overturned near the kitchen table, and blood spatter on the linoleum floor marked where Carmen Rodriguez had made her brave but futile stand against her attacker. The elderly woman had clearly fought for her life and her family's safety, but she had been no match for a younger, stronger assailant armed with a weapon. "The safe was in the master bedroom," Martinez explained as they walked down the hallway. "Professional job. They knew exactly where to look and how to crack it open." "This wasn't random, detective. Someone knew this family had cash in the house." The bedroom was in similar disarray, but it was the closet that drew Santa's attention. The door stood slightly ajar, and she could hear soft whimpering from within. Isabella Rodriguez, a petite woman in hospital scrubs, knelt outside the closet door, speaking in gentle Spanish to her daughter. "Emma, mi amor, it's safe now. The police are here. You can come out, baby." Santos approached quietly, not wanting to startle the child further. Through the crack in the closet door, she could see a tiny figure huddled in the corner, clutching a worn stuffed elephant that looked like it had been her comfort companion for years. Emma Rodriguez was a beautiful child with her mother's dark hair and expressive brown eyes, but those eyes now held a depth of terror that no 3-year-old should ever experience. "Has she said anything?" Santos asked Isabella in a low voice. "A little when I first got here," Isabella replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "She told me about a bad man with scary pictures on his arm who hurt Abuela. But she's getting quieter by the minute. I'm so scared, Detective. She was such a chatterbox before this, always talking about her dolls and asking a million questions. Now look at her." Santos had worked with traumatized children before, and she knew the window for getting information was often very small. The longer a child remained in shock, the more likely they were to retreat completely into themselves, taking crucial evidence with them into a world adults couldn't reach. "Emma?" Santos called softly, settling down on the carpet near the closet. "My name is Detective Santos. I'm here to help catch the bad man who hurt your abuela. Can you tell me what happened?" For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, barely audible, came a small voice from within the closet. "The bad man had scary pictures on his arm," Emma whispered, her words muffled by her stuffed elephant. "They looked like snakes and monsters. He was really, really big, and he made loud noises when he broke our door." Santos felt a surge of hope. A distinctive tattoo is exactly the kind of detail that could crack a case wide open. She pulled out her notepad and began writing carefully. "That's very brave of you to tell me that, Emma. What else do you remember about the bad man?" "He smelled funny," Emma continued, her voice slightly stronger now, "like the stuff Daddy puts in his car. And he had a big stick that he used to hurt Abuela." She screamed really loud, and then she stopped making noise, and I got scared and hid. The child's account was remarkably detailed for someone so young and traumatized. Santos could picture the scene. The intruder breaking down the door, likely reeking of gasoline or motor oil from a recent gas station stop, armed with what was probably a baseball bat or crowbar. Carmen Rodriguez had undoubtedly tried to protect her granddaughter and the family's savings, paying a terrible price for her courage. "Did the bad man see you, honey?" Santos asked gently. "No," Emma whispered. "I was very quiet, like when we play hide and seek. But I could see him through the little crack in the door. He was in Abuela's room for a really long time, making lots of noise." Over the next hour, Emma slowly emerged from the closet and provided additional details that painted a clear picture of the crime. The intruder had been a large man, probably in his 30s, with extensive tattoo work on his arms. He had known exactly where to find the family safe and had the tools needed to crack it open. Most importantly, he had spent considerable time in the house, apparently confident that he wouldn't be interrupted. But even as Emma provided these crucial details, Santos noticed troubling signs. The child's voice grew progressively quieter with each answer. Her responses became shorter and less detailed. By the time the paramedics arrived to check her over, Emma had retreated back into the closet and refused to speak to anyone except her mother, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the emergency physician who examined. Emma pulled Santos aside after completing her evaluation. "Physically, she's unharmed," Dr. Walsh reported, "but I'm deeply concerned about her psychological state. The child is showing classic signs of acute trauma response. If this progresses to selective mutism, as I suspect it might, she could stop speaking entirely." "How long would that last?" Santos asked, though she feared the answer. "Could be weeks, months, or in severe cases, years. Trauma affects children differently than adults. Their minds sometimes shut down completely as a protection mechanism. If Emma stops talking, you may have lost your only witness permanently." Dr. Walsh's prediction proved tragically accurate. Within hours of being taken to the hospital for observation, Emma Rodriguez stopped speaking entirely. The little girl who had bravely provided crucial details about her grandmother's attacker retreated into a world of complete silence, leaving Detective Santos with a growing case file, but no way to access the most important witness to the crime. As Santos stood in the hospital corridor at 3 a.m., watching Isabella Rodriguez hold her silent daughter, she made a silent vow. This case wouldn't go cold. Somehow, someway, she would find a path back to the frightened little girl who held the key to bringing a dangerous criminal to justice. She just had no idea that the solution would come in the form of a four-legged therapist with amber eyes and an extraordinary gift for reaching traumatized souls. The night that had begun with violence and terror was ending with a family in pieces, and a child lost in silence. But sometimes, in the darkest moments, the seeds of remarkable healing are planted, waiting for just the right conditions to grow into something beautiful and transformative. Emma Rodriguez's journey back to her voice would prove that miracles sometimes come in the most unexpected forms. 6 weeks had crawled by like a slow-motion nightmare for the Rodriguez family, each day bringing fresh despair as little Emma remained locked in her world of impenetrable silence. The investigation that had started with such promise was now gathering dust on Detective Santos' desk, another cold case file in a system overwhelmed by unsolved crimes. The forensic evidence pointed to a professional burglar familiar with the family's routines, but without Emma's testimony to connect. The dots, Marcus Thompson, their prime suspect based on the tattoo description, remained free on the streets of Montgomery. Isabella Rodriguez had taken leave from her job at Montgomery General Hospital to focus entirely on her daughter's recovery. But every therapy session felt like another dead end. Dr. Patricia Williams, the city's most respected child psychologist, had tried everything in her extensive toolkit. Play therapy sessions filled with dolls and drawing materials sat untouched. Emma would sit perfectly still for the entire hour, her dark eyes staring at nothing, her small hands folded in her lap like a miniature statue of grief. "I've seen selective mutism before," Dr. Williams explained to Isabella during one of their weekly consultations, "but never this severe in someone so young. Emma has created a psychological fortress around herself. Every traditional method we've tried, art therapy, sand play, even music therapy, gets the same response: complete withdrawal." The family's small ranch house had become a monument to failed attempts at healing. Coloring books lay unopened on the coffee table. A dollhouse that had once been Emma's favorite toy gathered dust in the corner. Even her beloved stuffed elephant, Peanut, couldn't coax so much as a whisper from the traumatized child. Isabella would find Emma sitting in her bedroom for hours, staring out the window at nothing, occasionally reaching out to touch Peanut's worn fabric, but never speaking to her once constant companion. Carmen Rodriguez had awakened from her coma after 3 weeks, her recovery nothing short of miraculous, according to her doctors. But the elderly woman's joy at surviving was overshadowed by watching her granddaughter fade away before her eyes. "She was my little chatterbox," Carmen would whisper from her wheelchair, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Always asking me to tell her stories, always laughing at my silly jokes. Now it's like she's not even here anymore." The breaking point came during a particularly difficult morning in late April. Emma had been sitting at the breakfast table for 2 hours, staring at a bowl of cereal that had long since turned to mush. Isabella, at her wit's end, had called Dr. Williams in tears. "I'm losing her," Isabella sobbed into the phone. "It's like watching my daughter disappear a little more each day. The Emma I knew, the happy, curious, talkative little girl. She's gone, and I don't know how to get her back." It was during this desperate phone call that Dr. Williams mentioned she had been consulting with colleagues across the country about unusual therapeutic approaches. One name kept coming up: Sarah Mitchell, a victim advocate at the Montgomery County Courthouse who had pioneered some unconventional methods for helping trauma survivors. "There's something I want to try," Dr. Williams said carefully. "It's never been done with someone Emma's age, and I can't promise anything. But Sarah has been working with a therapy dog that's had remarkable success with adult trauma victims." Sarah Mitchell was a force of nature in the Montgomery legal community, a former social worker who had transformed the courthouse's victim services program into a model for other jurisdictions. Her office walls were covered with thank you letters from crime victims who credited her innovative approaches with helping them find the strength to testify and heal. But her newest team member was unlike any therapeutic tool she had ever employed. Rex was a 3-year-old golden retriever whose journey to courthouse therapy work had been as remarkable as his ultimate calling. Originally trained as a service dog for a military veteran, Rex had shown an unusual aptitude for reading human emotional states and responding with precisely the right kind of comfort. When his first owner tragically died in a car accident, Rex had been donated to the courthouse program, where his gifts had flourished in ways that amazed everyone who worked with him. "Rex isn't just a therapy dog," Sarah explained to Isabella and Dr. Williams when they met at the courthouse. "He seems to have an almost supernatural ability to connect with people who are suffering. I've watched him work with rape victims who couldn't talk about their assault, domestic violence survivors too scared to face their abusers, and elderly fraud victims too embarrassed to admit they'd been swindled. Somehow, Rex gets through to them when nothing else can." The golden retriever in question was magnificent to behold, perfectly groomed, with intelligent amber eyes that seemed to see straight into a person's soul. His training was extensive and ongoing. He could sense anxiety attacks before they happened, provide pressure therapy by lying across someone's lap, and even alert his handler when someone was becoming overwhelmed during testimony. But it was his work with Officer Jake Morrison that had caught Dr. Williams' attention. Jake Morrison was a 10-year veteran of the Montgomery Police Department who had volunteered for the courthouse therapy dog program after witnessing too many victims suffer in silence. His own daughter had been traumatized in a school shooting 3 years earlier, and he understood firsthand how trauma could steal someone's voice. "Rex saved my family," Morrison told the Rodriguez women simply. "My daughter Katie wouldn't speak for months after the shooting. Rex somehow helped her find her way back to us." A plan they developed was simple but unprecedented. Rex would visit Emma at home, with no pressure, no agenda, no therapeutic goals beyond simply being present. If Emma showed any interest in the dog, they would gradually increase the visits. If not, they would explore other options. Everyone involved understood they were entering uncharted territory. No one had ever attempted animal-assisted therapy with a 3-year-old selective mute victim. The first meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning in early May. Isabella had prepared Emma as much as possible, explaining that a special helper dog was coming to visit, but Emma had shown no reaction to the news. She sat in her usual spot on the living room couch, holding Peanut, her face expressionless as a porcelain doll. When Officer Morrison's patrol car pulled into the driveway, Isabella felt her heart racing. This felt like their last hope, and the weight of that possibility was almost crushing. What if Rex couldn't reach Emma either? What if her daughter was truly lost to them forever? Morrison entered the house quietly, speaking in low tones with Isabella, while Rex remained calmly at his side. The dog's training was evident in every movement. He didn't rush toward Emma or demand attention. Instead, he simply existed in the space, his presence both gentle and commanding. For the first 10 minutes, Emma didn't even acknowledge Rex was there. She continued staring out the window, occasionally adjusting Peanut in her arms, giving no sign that she was aware of the magnificent golden retriever sitting patiently across the room. But Rex was watching Emma with laser focus, his intelligent eyes tracking her subtle movements, reading body language that humans couldn't detect. After 15 minutes of patient observation, Rex made his move. He didn't bound over excitedly or try to force interaction. Instead, Rex rose gracefully and walked slowly across the room, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He stopped directly in front of Emma's couch and simply sat down, looking up at her with those remarkable amber eyes. Still no response from Emma, but Rex wasn't deterred. What happened next would be talked about for months by everyone who witnessed it. Rex, without any command from Morrison, gently placed his large head on Emma's tiny lap, right next to where she held Peanut. The weight was reassuring rather than intrusive, warm, and solid and real. For the first time in 6 weeks, Emma Rodriguez moved voluntarily. She shifted slightly to accommodate Rex's head, and her free hand, the one not clutching Peanut, slowly, tentatively, reached out to touch the dog's golden fur. And then, like sunrise breaking through storm clouds, Emma smiled. It was barely perceptible, just the slightest upturn of her lips, but to Isabella, it was the most beautiful sight in the world. Her daughter was still in there, behind the walls of trauma and silence, waiting for the right key to unlock her prison. Rex had found the first crack in Emma's fortress, and everyone in the room knew they were witnessing the beginning of something extraordinary. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but what unfolded over the following 3 weeks defied every principle of child psychology that Dr. Patricia Williams had learned in her 20-year career. Emma's connection with Rex evolved into something that transcended typical animal-assisted therapy and entered territory that left medical professionals struggling for explanations. It started with small moments that Isabella barely dared to hope were real. The morning after Rex's first visit, Emma carried Peanut to the front window and stood there for nearly an hour, as if waiting for something. When Isabella asked what she was looking for, Emma didn't respond verbally, but she pressed her small palm against the glass and looked up at her mother with eyes that held the first spark of life they'd shown in weeks. Officer Morrison and Rex began visiting twice weekly, and Emma's behavior during these sessions became increasingly remarkable. During their third visit, Morrison was chatting with Isabella in the kitchen when they heard something that made them both freeze, the soft murmur of a child's voice from the living room. They crept to the doorway and saw Emma curled up next to Rex on the carpet, her lips moving close to his ear. "What do you think she's telling him?" Isabella whispered, tears streaming down her face at the sound of her daughter's voice, even if the words were inaudible. "I honestly don't know," Morrison replied, equally amazed. "But Rex is listening like he understands every word." The home security system that Isabella's brother had installed after the break-in captured these secret conversations on camera, creating a treasure trove of evidence that would later astound researchers. Hour after hour of footage showed Emma engaged in what appeared to be elaborate discussions with Rex, her animated expressions and gestures suggesting complex communication that no adult could decipher. Dr. James Chun, a specialist in child development and animal-assisted therapy from the University of Alabama, was brought in to observe these interactions. A man who prided himself on scientific skepticism, Chun arrived expecting to document a straightforward case of a traumatized child finding comfort in a therapy animal. What he witnessed challenged everything he thought he knew about interspecies communication. "Watch this," Isabella said during Chun's first observation session, pointing to the living room where Emma and Rex sat facing each other on the carpet. Emma was holding up different colored crayons, showing them to Rex one by one. Rex would tilt his head left for some colors and right for others, and Emma would nod approvingly or shake her head as if correcting him. "It's like they're having a conversation about color preferences," Sean murmured, making notes frantically. "But that's impossible. Dogs don't have color preferences in any meaningful sense, and even if they did, there's no way Emma could interpret Rex's responses with this level of consistency." Yet consistency was exactly what they observed. When Isabella repeated the color exercise 3 days later, without Rex present, Emma picked out the exact same colors that had earned Rex's approval, tilting her head left for blue and green, right for red and yellow, just as Rex had done. The breakthrough that convinced even the skeptics came during Emma's regular therapy session with Dr. Williams. For weeks, the child had refused to engage with any therapeutic activities, but with Rex present, something extraordinary happened. Williams placed a dollhouse in front of Emma, the same dollhouse that had gathered dust during previous sessions. Emma looked at Rex, who rose and walked around the dollhouse in a slow circle, stopping at specific points. Following Rex's cues, Emma began moving the tiny furniture inside the dollhouse, arranging and rearranging pieces with purpose and intensity. When she finished, the scene she had created was a perfect miniature replica of her grandmother's house on the night of the attack, complete with overturned furniture in the living room and a tiny figure lying motionless in the kitchen. "She's recreating the crime scene," Williams whispered to Morrison, who was observing from across the room. "But she's doing it by following Rex's movements around the dollhouse. It's as if he's guiding her through the memory." The most remarkable aspect was Emma's emotional state during these sessions. While recreating traumatic memories would typically trigger severe distress in a child with PTSD, Emma remained calm and focused throughout the exercise, frequently looking to Rex for what appeared to be reassurance and guidance. Morrison began documenting Rex's behavior with military precision, noting patterns that seemed impossible yet were undeniably consistent. Rex would position himself at specific locations in rooms, and Emma would respond by pointing to corresponding areas in photographs or drawings. When shown pictures of different men's faces during informal identification sessions, Emma would look to Rex, who would either remain still or shift his position slightly, prompting Emma to nod yes or no accordingly. The most stunning example occurred during a visit from Detective Santos, who brought photo arrays of potential suspects based on the tattoo descriptions Emma had provided on the night of the attack. Traditional identification procedures had been impossible due to Emma's mutism, but with Rex present, something remarkable happened. Santos laid out 6 photographs on the coffee table, all showing men with various snake tattoos on their arms. Emma studied each photo carefully and looked at Rex expectantly. Rex walked slowly along the row of photographs, pausing briefly at each one. When he reached the 4th photo, a mugshot of Marcus Thompson, their prime suspect, Rex sat down and placed his paw directly on the image. Emma immediately pointed to the same photograph and spoke her first clear words in weeks. "That's the bad man. Rex says so." Santos felt chills run down her spine. They had their identification, but the method was so unprecedented that she knew it would never hold up in court without corroborating evidence. Still, it gave the investigation new direction and energy. Dr. Chun spent hours analyzing video footage of Emma and Rex's interactions, looking for scientific explanations for behavior that seemed to border on telepathic communication. His preliminary findings, which he hesitated to publish without peer review, suggested that Emma was reading Rex's micro-expressions and body language with extraordinary accuracy, while Rex was responding to subtle cues from Emma that even trained observers couldn't detect. "It's as if they've developed their own language," Sean explained to a gathering of professionals working on Emma's case. "Emma has learned to interpret Rex's body language as communication, and Rex has learned to respond to Emma's emotional states and needs in ways that suggest genuine understanding of her psychological condition." But the most remarkable development came during the 4th week of their partnership. Isabella was working in the kitchen when she heard Emma's voice clearly from the living room, not whispering to Rex, but speaking at normal volume. She crept to the doorway and saw Emma sitting cross-legged in front of Rex, apparently teaching him something. When the bad man comes in dreams, you have to be brave like Abuela, Emma was explaining to Rex, who sat at attention as if absorbing every word. Abuela tried to protect me, and now you protect me when I'm scared. That's your job, right, Rex? Rex's tail wagged once, and Emma smiled, her first genuine smile since the night of the attack. I knew you understood, Emma continued. That's why you came to help me find my words again. Dr. Williams doesn't understand our secret language, but that's okay. Some things are just for us to know. Isabella backed away from the doorway, overwhelmed by the realization that her daughter was not only speaking again, but processing her trauma in ways that seemed healthier and more productive than anything traditional therapy had achieved. Emma was using her relationship with Rex as a bridge back to the world of human communication, and somehow the extraordinary dog was meeting her halfway. The partnership between a traumatized 3-year-old and a golden retriever was evolving into something that would soon challenge the legal system's understanding of witness testimony and forever change how society approaches healing in its most vulnerable victims. Emma and Rex had created their own universe of understanding, and everyone around them was about to discover just how powerful that bond could be in the pursuit of justice and healing. 4 months after the brutal attack that had shattered the Rodriguez family's world, Detective Maria Santos found herself staring at a case file that felt like a ticking time bomb. The evidence was compelling but circumstantial. Fingerprints on the broken door frame, DNA traces that could have belonged to any number of individuals, and security footage from a neighboring gas station showing a figure matching Marcus Thompson's build purchasing gasoline and cigarettes an hour before the attack. But without Emma's testimony, the district attorney's office was reluctant to proceed with charges that might not stick. The pressure was mounting from multiple directions. Carmen Rodriguez, now recovered enough to walk with a cane, called Santos daily, asking for updates on the case. Isabella had exhausted her savings during her unpaid leave and desperately needed closure to rebuild their lives. Most critically, Thompson had been spotted in the neighborhood twice in recent weeks, apparently casing other potential targets. The man who had brutalized an elderly woman and traumatized a 3-year-old was still free, and Santos knew it was only a matter of time before he struck again. District Attorney Robert Hayes was a pragmatic man who had built his career on winning cases, not taking noble stands that ended in acquittals. When Santos requested a meeting to discuss Emma's case, she could see the resignation in his eyes before she even sat down in his oak-paneled office. Maria, I understand your frustration, Hayes said, leaning back in his leather chair. But you're asking me to build a prosecution around the testimony of a 3-year-old who communicates through a therapy dog. Do you have any idea how that would play to a jury? To the media? The defense would tear us apart. Sir, with respect, Emma's identification of Thompson was rock solid. She picked him out of a photo array without hesitation. Her description of his tattoos matches perfectly with his booking photos, and her account of the crime scene aligns with all our physical evidence. Hayes rubbed his temples, a gesture Santos recognized from their previous conversations about difficult cases. Even if I believe the dog somehow helped her testify, which frankly sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, there's no legal precedent for it. Judge Wells would throw it out before opening arguments. It was prosecutor Linda Chong who offered the suggestion it would change everything. Chong was the youngest attorney in the DA's office, a Harvard Law graduate who had joined the Montgomery team specifically because she wanted to handle cases that mattered to real families. She had been following Emma's case from the beginning and understood better than anyone how crucial the child's testimony could be. What if we requested a competency hearing first? Chong suggested during their case review meeting, not to determine if Emma can testify in the traditional sense, but to establish a new framework for how traumatized child witnesses might be accommodated under existing disability and victims' rights statutes. Santos felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. You mean treat Emma's communication method with Rex as a reasonable accommodation, like sign language interpreters or assisted communication devices? Exactly. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires courts to provide reasonable accommodations for individuals with communication impairments. Emma's selective mutism is a documented medical condition. Her communication through Rex isn't magic. It's an adaptive technique she's developed to overcome trauma-induced speech barriers. Hayes remained skeptical, but Chong's legal reasoning was sound enough to warrant exploration. They decided to request an informal hearing with Judge Catherine Wells, known throughout Alabama's legal community as a fair but tough jurist who wasn't afraid to set precedent when justice demanded it. The informal hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in Judge Wells' chambers. The group that assembled was unlike any that had ever gathered in the Montgomery County Courthouse. Dr. Patricia Williams brought thick folders of Emma's psychological evaluations. Dr. James Chun presented his research on Emma and Rex's communication patterns. Officer Morrison sat quietly with Rex at his side, the golden retriever somehow sensing the gravity of the moment. Emma herself was the calmest person in the room. She sat between her mother and Rex, occasionally whispering something to the dog, who would respond with subtle movements that seemed to reassure her. "This is highly irregular," Judge Wells began, her voice carrying the authority of 30 years on the bench. "I've never been asked to rule on whether a child can testify through a therapy animal. To be honest, I'm not even sure it's legally possible." Chang stood and presented her research with the passion of someone who had spent sleepless nights preparing for this moment. She cited cases involving nonverbal autistic children who testified through communication boards, deaf witnesses who used sign language interpreters, and trauma victims who were allowed support animals during proceedings. "Your Honor, Emma Rodriguez is not trying to circumvent proper legal procedures. She's asking for reasonable accommodation that allows her to exercise her fundamental right to seek justice for crimes committed against her family. Her communication method with Rex is documented, consistent, and reliable. It's no different from any other assistive communication technology." Defense attorney Michael Torres, representing Thompson, argued vehemently against the unprecedented accommodation. "Your Honor, this sets a dangerous precedent. Where does it end? Will we have defendants claiming their pets can provide alibis? Will every child witness suddenly need an emotional support animal? This is a courtroom, not a petting zoo." But Judge Wells had been watching Emma throughout the arguments, and what she observed intrigued her. The child showed no signs of the distress typically exhibited by traumatized witnesses. She seemed calm, focused, and genuinely present in ways that suggested genuine readiness to participate in legal proceedings. "I'm going to allow a demonstration," Judge Wells announced, surprising everyone in the chamber. "Right here, right now. I want to see exactly how this communication method works." Chang approached Emma gently, kneeling to the child's eye level. "Emma, can you show the judge how you and Rex work together?" Emma looked at Rex, who rose from his position beside Morrison and walked to the center of the chamber. Without any apparent signal from Emma, Rex began moving around the room, stopping at specific locations and looking back at Emma for confirmation. "Rex is showing where people were during the bad time," Emma explained in her small but clear voice. "He sits where the bad man was when he hurt Abuela." Rex moved to a spot near Judge Wells' desk and sat down, looking back at Emma. Emma nodded approvingly. "That's right, Rex. He was there when he broke our door." Judge Wells leaned forward, fascinated despite her judicial reserve. "Emma, how? Does Rex know where the bad man was?" Emma looked at Rex, who tilted his head slightly to the right. Rex says I told him in our secret language. I remember everything, but sometimes the words get stuck. Rex helps me show what I remember when talking is too hard. What happened next would be debated by legal scholars for years to come. Judge Wells asked Emma to describe the attacker's distinctive tattoos, a detail crucial to the prosecution. Emma whispered something to Rex, who immediately walked to a table where evidence photos were spread out. Rex sat down directly in front of a photograph of Marcus Thompson's snake tattoo, placing his paw on the image. That's the scary picture on the bad man's arm, Emma said, pointing to the same photograph. Rex remembers it too because I showed him in my mind. The room fell completely silent. Even Torres, the defense attorney, seemed stunned by the clarity and consistency of Emma's responses when working with Rex. Judge Wells studied the child and dog carefully, watching their subtle interactions with the eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating witness credibility. This is either the most elaborate coaching scheme I've ever witnessed, or we're looking at a genuine breakthrough in trauma therapy, Judge Wells said finally. Dr. Williams, in your professional opinion, is Emma capable of providing reliable testimony using this method? Your Honor, Emma's responses when working with Rex show more consistency and detail than anything we've achieved through traditional therapeutic techniques. I believe she's not only capable of testifying, but that Rex's presence actually enhances her ability to access and communicate traumatic memories accurately. Judge Wells made her historic decision that afternoon. I'm going to allow this testimony, under strict guidelines and with extensive expert oversight. If Emma Rodriguez can help us understand what happened in her home that night, then this court has an obligation to listen, regardless of how unconventional the communication method might be. The precedent was set. Emma and Rex would make legal history together, proving that sometimes justice requires us to expand our understanding of what's possible when healing and determination joined forces in the pursuit of truth. The courtroom that had seen thousands of testimonies over the decades was about to witness something that would change how society thinks about trauma, communication, and the remarkable bonds that can form between humans and animals in the darkest of times. The little girl who had been silenced by terror was about to find her voice again, and she would speak through the most unlikely interpreter imaginable. News of Judge Wells' unprecedented decision spread through the legal community like wildfire, igniting a firestorm of controversy that reached far beyond Montgomery County's courthouse steps. Within hours of the ruling, legal scholars from Harvard to Stanford were debating the implications on cable news programs, while social media exploded with opinions ranging from heartfelt support to outright ridicule. The headline in the Montgomery Advertiser read, "3-year-old to testify through therapy dog in groundbreaking case." And by evening, the story had been picked up by CNN, Fox News, and every major network in America. The courthouse parking lot resembled a media circus, with satellite trucks creating a maze of cables and reporters practicing their stand-ups against the backdrop of Alabama's antebellum architecture. Defense attorney Michael Torres wasted no time launching his counterattack. A sharp-dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and a reputation for winning impossible cases, Torres had built his career on exploiting legal technicalities and procedural errors. The Emma Rodriguez case represented both his biggest challenge and his greatest opportunity for national recognition. "This isn't justice, it's a circus," Torres declared at a hastily arranged press conference on the courthouse steps. Behind him, protesters held signs reading, "Dogs don't testify," and "Real evidence, not pet tricks." Torres had orchestrated the demonstration with the precision of a political campaign, knowing that public opinion could influence potential jurors before they ever set foot in the courtroom. "My client, Marcus Thompson, is presumed innocent until proven guilty by admissible evidence and credible testimony," Torres continued, his voice rising with practiced indignation. We cannot allow our legal system to be degraded by parlor tricks and emotional manipulation. A 3-year-old child whispering to a dog is not testimony. It's a tragedy masquerading as justice. Torres filed motion after motion, each one more creative than the last. He challenged Emma's mental competency, questioned Rex's training credentials, and demanded psychological evaluations for everyone involved in the case. His legal brief, running over 200 pages, cited everything from medieval witch trials to modern cases involving hypnotic regression, arguing that Emma's communication with Rex was no different from discredited pseudoscientific techniques. The defense strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Create so much doubt about the testimony method that the jury would reject it entirely, leaving the prosecution with only circumstantial evidence that couldn't support a conviction. Torres knew that if he could paint Emma and Rex as a sideshow attraction rather than legitimate witnesses, he could walk Marcus Thompson out of the courtroom a free man. Prosecutor Linda Chong found herself fighting a war on multiple fronts. Not only did she have to prepare for the most unusual trial of her career, but she was also battling skepticism within her own office. Several senior prosecutors had privately expressed concerns that the case would damage the DA's reputation and set dangerous precedents for future prosecutions. Linda, I admire your passion, but you're asking 12 jurors to believe that a toddler and a golden retriever can solve a violent crime. Assistant DI Robert Martinez warned during one of their strategy sessions. The defense is going to make us look like we've lost our minds. Chong spent 18-hour days preparing for every possible attack Torres might launch. She brought in Dr. Sarah Hendricks, a forensic psychologist from Emory University, who specialized in child witness testimony, and Dr. Michael Chun, a veterinary behaviorist who could explain the science behind human-animal communication. Her office walls became covered with charts, timelines, and photographs documenting every aspect of Emma and Rex's partnership. The legal precedents Chong uncovered were both encouraging and terrifying. Courts had allowed children to testify with comfort items, emotional support animals, and various accommodations for disabilities. But no court had ever ruled on whether a therapy animal could serve as an active communication aid rather than passive emotional support. We're not just trying to win a case, Chong told her team during a late-night preparation session. We're trying to redefine what justice looks like for the most vulnerable victims in our society. If we succeed, we could help thousands of traumatized children find their voices. If we fail, we might have made it harder for future victims to be heard. Meanwhile, the scientific community was taking sides with the passion typically reserved for climate change debates. Dr. Temple Grandin, the renowned animal behavior expert, wrote an op-ed supporting Emma's testimony method, arguing that animals had been helping humans communicate and heal for millennia. Opposing voices included Dr. Richard Steinberg, a child psychiatrist from Johns Hopkins, who warned that allowing such testimony could lead to false memories and coached responses. The media attention brought unexpected support from advocacy groups nationwide. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children issued a statement supporting innovative approaches to helping child victims testify. Therapy dog organizations rallied behind Emma and Rex, organizing fundraisers for their legal expenses and training programs. But the publicity also attracted critics who saw the case as everything wrong with modern society. Religious groups questioned whether animals should play such roles in human justice. Legal purists argued that emotional appeals were corrupting rational jurisprudence. Talk radio hosts turned Emma's story into a political wedge issue with conservative voices, decrying liberal judges gone wild and progressive commentators celebrating breakthrough accommodations for trauma survivors. The pressure on the Rodriguez family became overwhelming. Isabella had to disconnect their home phone due to constant calls from reporters, book agents, and documentary filmmakers. Protesters gathered outside their house, some supportive, others hostile. Carmen Rodriguez, still recovering from her injuries, found the circus atmosphere deeply distressing. "I just want justice for what that man did to our family," Carmen told a trusted friend. "I don't understand why helping Emma speak is so controversial. When I was a child, we didn't have fancy therapy, but if a dog could have helped me through hard times, my mother would have brought home every stray in the neighborhood." Emma herself seemed remarkably unaffected by the chaos surrounding her case. She continued her daily routines with Rex, their bond growing stronger despite the pressure. Dr. Williams documented their sessions meticulously, knowing that every interaction might be scrutinized by hostile experts looking for signs of coaching or manipulation. "Emma doesn't understand she's become the center of a national debate," Dr. Williams explained to concerned family members. "To her, she's just a little girl who found a way to talk about scary things with help from her friend Rex. The fact that adults are making it complicated doesn't change the genuine nature of their communication." Torres continued his media blitz, appearing on talk shows and legal programs to argue his case in the court of public opinion. He was careful to express sympathy for Emma while attacking the legal process, positioning himself as a defender of constitutional rights rather than someone protecting a violent criminal. "I feel tremendous compassion for this traumatized child and her family," Torres said during an appearance on Nancy Grace's show. "But compassion cannot override our constitutional obligation to ensure fair trials based on reliable evidence. If we allow testimony like this today, what's next? Seances with murder victims? Psychics channeling witnesses? The Constitution protects all of us, including my client, from prosecution based on unreliable evidence, no matter how emotionally compelling." Chung countered with her own media strategy, arranging interviews with respected experts who could explain the science behind Emma and Rex's communication. She walked a careful line, wanting to build public support without appearing to try the case in the media. As jury selection approached, both sides knew they were participating in something unprecedented in American legal history. The stakes couldn't have been higher. A violent criminal's freedom, a little girl's justice, and the future of how society accommodates its most vulnerable witnesses. The courtroom battles that lay ahead would determine not just Marcus Thompson's fate, but whether Emma Rodriguez and Rex would prove that sometimes the most powerful voices for justice come in the most unexpected forms. The entire legal system was about to discover whether centuries of precedent could adapt to accommodate the extraordinary bond between a traumatized child and the therapy dog, who had become her voice in a world that desperately needed to hear her truth. The morning of November 15, 2019, dawned crisp and clear over Montgomery, Alabama, but the atmosphere surrounding the courthouse was electric with tension and anticipation. By 6 a.m., nearly 3 hours before proceedings were scheduled to begin, hundreds of people had already gathered outside the historic building. Court TV had positioned cameras at every entrance, while sketch artists clutched their pads, knowing that cameras would not be allowed inside Judge Wells' courtroom during Emma's testimony. The jury selection process had taken 2 grueling weeks, with both sides fighting over every potential juror's background, beliefs about animal intelligence, and attitudes toward innovative legal procedures. Chong and Torres had questioned over 200 candidates before settling on 12 jurors and 4 alternates who claimed they could evaluate Emma's testimony fairly, despite the unprecedented nature of her communication method. Inside the courthouse, security was unlike anything Montgomery had ever seen. Metal detectors had been reinforced, additional bailiffs brought in from surrounding counties, and therapy dog Rex had his own security protocol. Officer Morrison arrived 2 hours early to allow Rex time to acclimate to the courtroom environment, knowing that the dog's performance would be crucial to Emma's ability to testify effectively. Marcus Thompson sat at the defense table in a carefully chosen gray suit, his extensive tattoos covered by long sleeves and makeup. At 34, Thompson was a career criminal with convictions for burglary, assault, and drug dealing. But his appearance had been transformed by his legal team's image consultants. The intimidating man who had terrorized the Rodriguez family now looked like a suburban accountant, complete with wire-rimmed glasses and a conservative haircut. The prosecution's case depends entirely on the testimony of a 3-year-old child who claims to communicate through a dog, Torres had told reporters during his final pre-trial press conference. When you strip away the emotional manipulation and media circus, there simply isn't enough evidence to convict my client beyond a reasonable doubt. Chang's opening statement was a masterpiece of legal advocacy that balanced emotional appeal with cold, hard facts. She walked the jury through the evidence methodically. Thompson's fingerprints on the broken door frame, his presence in the neighborhood on the night of the attack, his known pattern of targeting elderly victims with cash, savings, and most crucially, his distinctive snake tattoo that matched Emma's description perfectly. Emma Rodriguez may be only 3 years old, but she is the sole witness to a brutal crime that left her grandmother fighting for her life, Chang told the riveted jury. The defense wants you to focus on how Emma communicates rather than what she has to tell us. But I ask you to listen to her testimony with open minds and hearts, because this brave little girl holds the key to justice. The prosecution's first witnesses established the foundation of their case through traditional means. Detective Santos walked the jury through the crime scene, using photographs and diagrams to reconstruct the violent home invasion. EMTs testified about Carmen Rodriguez's life-threatening injuries and the extensive damage to the family's home. Forensic experts connected Thompson's fingerprints to the scene and established his presence in the neighborhood through security camera footage. But everyone in the courtroom knew that the real drama would come when Emma took the stand with Rex at her side. Torres' cross-examinations were surgical in their precision, designed to plant seeds of doubt about the physical evidence while building toward his central argument that Emma's testimony was unreliable. He questioned the chain of custody for fingerprint evidence, suggested alternative explanations for Thompson's presence in the neighborhood, and repeatedly emphasized the circumstantial nature of the prosecution's case. Mr. Thompson has never denied being in the area that night, Torres told the jury during one particularly effective cross-examination of Detective Santos. He was visiting a friend who lives 6 blocks away. The prosecution wants you to believe that circumstantial evidence and the imaginative testimony of a traumatized toddler constitute proof beyond reasonable doubt. The moment everyone had been waiting for arrived on the trial's 3rd day. Judge Wells cleared the courtroom of all spectators, except immediate family members, court personnel, and a small pool of reporters. The gallery, which had been packed throughout the trial, suddenly felt cavernous and quiet as Emma Rodriguez entered through a side door with her mother, Rex, and Officer Morrison. Emma looked impossibly small as she approached the witness stand, wearing a yellow dress that her grandmother had helped her choose because yellow is happy like sunshine. Rex walked calmly beside her, his training evident in every measured step. The courtroom fell completely silent as Morrison helped Emma into the witness chair while Rex settled on a specially placed mat directly beside her. Judge Wells' voice was gentle but authoritative as she addressed the unprecedented witness. Emma, do you understand that you're here to tell us what happened the night the bad man came to your house? Emma nodded solemnly, her small hand reaching out to rest on Rex's head. Rex says it's okay to tell the truth because truth helps people, she replied in her clear, sweet voice. Chang approached the witness stand with the care of someone handling precious crystal. Her questions began simply, establishing Emma's ability to recall events and understand the difference between truth and lies. Emma's responses were clear and consistent. occasionally punctuated by whispered consultations with Rex that seemed to give her strength and clarity. "Emma, can you tell us what you remember about the night the bad man came to your house?" Emma looked at Rex, who remained perfectly still, his intelligent eyes focused on the child beside him. "I was sleeping, but loud noises woke me up. Rex says it's okay to remember the scary parts, because remembering helps catch bad people." What followed was testimony unlike anything in American legal history. Emma recounted the events of that terrible night with remarkable clarity, using Rex as both emotional support and communication facilitator. When her words faltered, she would whisper to Rex, who would respond with subtle movements that seemed to encourage her to continue. The most dramatic moment came when Chong introduced the scale model of the Rodriguez house that had been prepared specifically for Emma's testimony. "Emma, can you show us where the bad man was when he hurt your grandmother?" Emma looked at Rex expectantly. Without any visible command from Morrison, Rex rose gracefully and walked to the model house, stopping at the kitchen area and sitting down precisely where Carmen Rodriguez had been found by first responders. "That's where he hurt Abuela," Emma confirmed, pointing to the same spot. "Rex remembers because I showed him in my mind pictures." The jury watched in fascination as Emma and Rex worked together to recreate the crime scene with stunning accuracy. Rex's movements around the model corresponded perfectly with the physical evidence, while Emma provided narrative details that only an eyewitness could have known. The climactic moment came when Chong presented Emma with photographs of various tattoos, including several that bore no resemblance to what she had described. Emma studied each image carefully, occasionally glancing at Rex for what appeared to be confirmation or encouragement. When she reached Marcus Thompson's distinctive snake tattoo, her reaction was immediate and definitive. Rex, without any apparent signal from anyone, placed his paw directly on the photograph, while Emma pointed with obvious recognition. "That's the scary snake on the bad man's arm," Emma said with absolute certainty. "It looked just like that when he hurt Abuela." Rex says, "We both remember it exactly right." Even Torres seemed momentarily stunned by the precision and consistency of Emma's testimony. His cross-examination was gentle, almost respectful, as he tried to suggest that Emma might be confused or influenced by adult suggestions. But Emma's responses remained unwavering, and her partnership with Rex seemed to give her an unshakable confidence in her memories. "Emma, isn't it possible that you're imagining some of these things because you are very scared?" Torres asked carefully. Emma looked at Rex, who tilted his head slightly to one side. Rex says scared feelings and true memories are different things. "I was very scared, but I still remember everything that really happened." As Emma concluded her testimony and walked out of the courtroom with Rex beside her, everyone present knew they had witnessed something unprecedented in American jurisprudence. A 3-year-old child and a golden retriever had just delivered testimony that was more compelling and detailed than many adult witnesses could have provided. The question now was whether 12 jurors would accept that justice could speak through such an extraordinary partnership, or whether the defense's arguments about reliable evidence and constitutional protections would prevail. The fate of Marcus Thompson and the future of trauma-informed legal procedures now rested in the hands of citizens who had never imagined they would be asked to evaluate testimony delivered through the ancient bond between a child and her 4-legged guardian. The jury deliberation lasted exactly 2 hours and 17 minutes, a remarkably short time for such a groundbreaking case. Court observers had predicted days of debate over the unprecedented testimony, but when the 12 citizens emerged from the jury room at 3:47 p.m. on November 18th, their faces told the story before the verdict was ever read. Foreman James Mitchell, a retired high school principal who had initially expressed skepticism about Emma's testimony method, stood with visible emotion as he addressed the packed courtroom. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Thompson, guilty. On all counts: home invasion, aggravated assault, elder abuse, and grand theft. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of celebration and disbelief. Isabella Rodriguez collapsed into her mother's arms, both women crying tears they had held back for 8 months. Detective Santos, who had worked the case with relentless determination, wiped away tears as she watched justice finally served. Even seasoned court reporters found themselves emotionally overcome by the moment. Marcus Thompson showed no visible reaction to the verdict, but his defense attorney, Torres, immediately announced plans to appeal, claiming the trial had been a mockery of constitutional protections and that his client had been convicted by a circus act rather than credible evidence. Judge Wells, however, had anticipated this response. Before sentencing, she delivered a statement that would be quoted in law schools for decades to come. "Mr. Thompson, you have been convicted not by circus acts or emotional manipulation, but by the most fundamental element of our justice system, truth." Emma Rodriguez, with the help of her remarkable companion Rex, provided testimony that was consistent, detailed, and corroborated by extensive physical evidence. This court recognizes that her communication method was unusual, but unusual circumstances sometimes require unusual accommodations in the pursuit of justice. Thompson received the maximum sentence, 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. But the real victory extended far beyond the courtroom walls. The impact on Emma herself was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire ordeal. Dr. Patricia Williams documented what she termed breakthrough recovery in her clinical notes. Emma's ability to testify successfully had unlocked something profound in her psychological healing process. The little girl who had been trapped in selective mutism for months was now speaking freely, not just to Rex, but to her family, therapists, and even strangers. It's like testifying gave her permission to use her voice again. Dr. Williams explained to the research team that had gathered to study Emma's case. She proved to herself that her words have power, that speaking truth can create change. That's an incredibly empowering realization for someone who felt powerless during her trauma. The change was evident in Emma's daily life. She began asking the constant stream of questions typical for a 3-year-old, chattering about her dolls, requesting bedtime stories, and even arguing with her mother about vegetables, normal childhood behaviors that had seemed impossible just months earlier. Most remarkably, she started comforting other children who were afraid, telling them that brave words can catch bad people, and that sometimes dogs help us remember how to be strong. Carmen Rodriguez, now fully recovered from her physical injuries, became Emma's biggest cheerleader in this healing process. "My granddaughter taught me that courage comes in many forms," she told reporters after the trial. She found a way to speak when speaking seemed impossible, and in doing so, she not only got justice for our family, but showed the world that healing can happen in the most unexpected ways. The case's impact rippled far beyond the Rodriguez family. Within weeks of the verdict, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children established the Emma Rodriguez Protocol, providing guidelines for courts considering animal-assisted testimony from child witnesses. Dr. Williams received funding for a comprehensive study on trauma recovery through human-animal partnerships, with Emma and Rex's case serving as the foundational research. Officer Morrison found himself at the center of a revolution in courthouse therapy programs. Requests poured in from jurisdictions across the country, wanting to establish their own therapy dog programs, modeled on Emma and Rex's success. Morrison began traveling to train new handler teams, always emphasizing that the key wasn't the dog's abilities alone, but the unique bond formed between animal and victim. Rex didn't magically give Emma her voice back, Morrison explained to a gathering of victim advocates in Atlanta. He gave her a safe space to find her voice again. "There's a difference," and understanding that difference is crucial for anyone wanting to replicate what we accomplished in Montgomery. Rex himself seemed to understand his new status as a pioneering therapy animal. The golden retriever, who had always been exceptional in his work, now carried himself with what Morrison described as quiet dignity, aware that he had participated in something historic while remaining focused on his primary mission of helping humans heal. The legislative impact was equally dramatic. Within 6 months, Alabama passed Emma's Law, establishing comprehensive protocols for accommodating child witnesses with trauma-induced communication disorders. The legislation provided training requirements for therapy animals, certification, processes for handlers, and legal frameworks for innovative testimony methods. Similar legislation was introduced in 12 other states, while legal scholars began incorporating Emma's case into curricula on victim rights, disability accommodations, and evolving courtroom procedures. The case was cited in law review articles, presented at legal conferences, and became a touchstone for advocates pushing for more trauma-informed approaches to justice. Perhaps most importantly, Emma's success opened doors for other child victims who had been unable to participate in legal proceedings due to trauma-related communication barriers. The Rodriguez family began receiving letters from across the country. Families whose children had been helped by the precedent Emma and Rex had established. 8-year-old Sarah Chun from California, who had witnessed her father's murder but couldn't speak about it for 2 years, successfully testified with the help of a specially trained therapy dog. 5-year-old Michael Washington from Georgia overcame severe autism-related communication challenges to help convict his abuser through animal-assisted testimony. The ripple effects of Emma's courage were creating waves of healing and justice nationwide. Dr. James Chai, the child development specialist who had initially been baffled by Emma and Rex's communication, published groundbreaking research on interspecies therapeutic partnerships. His findings suggested that the Emma-Rex phenomenon was not unique, but rather represented an untapped potential in trauma recovery that society was only beginning to understand. What we witnessed in Montgomery wasn't magic, Chon wrote in the Ambi Journal of Child Psychology. It was the natural result of combining innovative, therapeutic approaches with the ancient healing power of human-animal bonds. Emma and Rex showed us that when we expand our definition of communication, we expand our ability to help traumatized individuals heal and seek justice. The media attention, while sometimes overwhelming, ultimately served a greater purpose. Emma's story inspired documentary filmmakers, children's book authors, and advocacy organizations to spotlight the needs of child crime victims. The little girl who had been silenced by terror had become a voice for countless other children facing similar challenges. As the first anniversary of the attack approached, the Rodriguez family reflected on their extraordinary journey from trauma to triumph. Isabella had returned to work at the hospital, where she now served as an advocate for families dealing with childhood trauma. Carmen had started a support group for elderly crime victims, drawing strength from her granddaughters. Example of finding courage in the darkest moments. Most importantly, Emma continued to thrive, her relationship with Rex evolving from therapeutic necessity to genuine friendship. The little girl and the golden retriever, who had made legal history together, were now simply a child and her beloved companion, proof that the most profound healing often comes through the simplest connections. Their story had transformed from a tale of survival into a beacon of hope, showing the world that justice and healing are possible even in the aftermath of the most traumatic experiences, especially when courage walks on 4 legs and speaks through the innocent voice of a child who refused to let fear have the final word. 1 year, 7 months, and 12 days after the night that changed everything, Emma Rodriguez stood in her backyard on a perfect Alabama morning, wearing a pink birthday dress with golden retriever paw prints embroidered along the hem. custom design created by her grandmother to honor the friendship that had saved their family. At 4 years old, Emma was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the healing power of unconditional love. Rex now officially retired from courthouse duty, but never retired from Emma's heart, wore a special birthday bandana that read "Hero Dog" in sparkly letters. At 5 years old, the golden retriever had settled into a life of comfortable domesticity, but his alert amber eyes still held the intelligence and compassion that had made him legendary in therapeutic circles. Worldwide, the birthday party in the Rodriguez backyard was unlike most children's celebrations. Among the usual chaos of balloons, cake, and giggling children were some unexpected guests. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had documented Emma's journey from selective mutism to eloquent spokesperson. Officer Jake Morrison, who had found his calling, training the next generation of therapy dog teams. Detective Maria Santos, who had never given up on a case that seemed impossible to solve. And Judge Catherine Wells, who had taken a personal interest in Emma's continued development. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Emma announced from her makeshift stage, a picnic table decorated with streamers, her voice clear and confident as she addressed her party guests. I want to thank everyone for coming to my birthday party. But most especially, I want to thank my best friend Rex for teaching me how to use my words again when they got lost in the scary place. The adults in attendance felt the familiar tightening in their throats that came whenever Emma spoke about her journey. This little girl, who had once been trapped in silence by trauma, was now an articulate advocate for other children facing similar challenges. Her transformation was nothing short of miraculous, but more importantly, it was authentic and lasting. When the bad man hurt my abuela, my words went away because I was too scared to use them. Emma continued, unconsciously reaching down to pat Rex's head as he sat beside her stage. But Rex didn't give me new words. He helped me remember that. My words were always there, just hiding. And now I know that words are very powerful things that can help catch bad people and make scared kids feel better. The crowd of children and adults listened in rapt attention as Emma, with the natural storytelling ability of a born communicator, recounted her friendship with Rex in terms that even the youngest party guests could understand. She talked about how Rex taught her that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing, even when you are scared. Isabella Rodriguez watched her daughter with wonder and gratitude that seemed to grow stronger each day. The frightened, silent child who had hidden in closets had become a confident little girl who read stories aloud to nursing home residents, comforted other children during doctor visits, and had even testified before a state legislative committee about the importance of therapy animals in helping crime victims. Sometimes people ask me how Emma got so wise so young, Isabella told Dr. Williams as they watched Emma distribute party favors to her guests. I think trauma doesn't just take things away. Sometimes it gives you understanding that other children don't have. Emma learned that voices matter, that truth has power, and that healing comes in many forms. Those are lessons most adults never fully grasp. The party took a special turn when Emma announced that she had prepared a surprise for Rex. With help from her grandmother, she had written and illustrated a book called Rex and Emma's Big Adventure, which told their story from Rex's perspective. As Emma read the book aloud, complete with her own colorful drawings of a golden dog helping a little girl find her voice, even the adults found themselves transported into the world she had created. Once upon a time, there was a very smart dog named Rex who had a special job helping people feel better. Emma read, holding up a drawing of Rex wearing his courthouse therapy vest. One day, Rex met a little girl who had lost her words in a very scary place. Rex didn't have magic powers, but he had something even better. He had love and patience, and the ability to listen with his whole heart. The story continued with Emma's innocent, a profound understanding of their partnership. In her version, Rex didn't perform miracles, but simply provided the safe space she needed to rediscover her own strength. The book concluded with both Emma and Rex helping other children and dogs learn to communicate with each other, spreading healing wherever they went. Judge Wells, who had been privately emotional throughout the party, approached Emma after the story reading. "Emma, you know that you and Rex changed how courts help scared children, don't you?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Mama told me that other kids who got hurt can now have dog friends help them talk to judges. That makes me happy because being scared alone is much harder than being scared with a friend." The judge smiled, remembering the legal firestorm that had surrounded Emma's case. Now, 18 months later, animal-assisted testimony had been successfully used in over 40 cases across 17 states. The Emma Rodriguez Protocol had become standard training for victim advocates, and law schools were teaching courses on trauma-informed courtroom procedures. Officer Morrison approached with a special announcement that brought tears to many eyes. "Emma, I want you to know that because you and Rex showed everyone how powerful friendship can be, we now have 23 therapy dog teams working in courthouses across Alabama. Each team has been trained using what we learned from watching you two together." Emma's response was typical of her practical wisdom. "That's good, Officer Morrison, because there are lots of scared kids who need dog friends. Rex can't help them all by himself. He's getting old and likes naps now." The crowd laughed as Rex, as if on cue, yawned and settled down for a snooze in the shade. The party's most moving moment came when Carmen Rodriguez, now walking without assistance and serving as a volunteer victim advocate, presented Emma with a special gift, a photo album chronicling Emma's journey from the silent child hiding in a closet to the confident little girl standing before them. "Mia, this album shows your courage story," Carmen said, her voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes when people face hard times, they might forget that healing is possible. But they can look at your pictures and remember that even the smallest voices can make the biggest difference." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Emma took Rex by the collar and led him to their favorite spot under the oak tree in the backyard. There, surrounded by the remnants of her celebration, she opened a new book, one of many gifts she had received, and began reading aloud to her faithful companion. The sight of the little girl and the golden retriever sharing stories in the dappled sunlight perfectly captured the essence of their relationship. What had begun as therapeutic necessity had evolved into genuine friendship, and what had started as a desperate attempt to help one traumatized child had become a movement that was helping thousands of others. Dr. Williams, preparing to leave, paused to document one final observation in her research notes. Subject continues to demonstrate remarkable resilience and growth. The therapeutic partnership with Rex has evolved beyond its original clinical purpose into a sustainable support system that appears to strengthen both participants. Most significantly, Emma has transformed from victim to advocate, using her experience to help other trauma survivors while maintaining age-appropriate developmental progress. As evening fell over the Rodriguez household, Emma and Rex settled into their nightly routine of reading time. Tonight, Emma chose a book about brave knights and faithful steeds, unconsciously echoing the partnership that had defined their own adventure. "Rex," Emma said as she turned the final page, "do you think we helped people understand that being different isn't bad? It's just different?" Rex's tail wagged once, their old signal of agreement, and Emma smiled with satisfaction. The little girl who had once been silenced by terror had found her voice, and in doing so, had amplified the voices of countless others who needed to be heard. Their story would continue to inspire, educate, and heal long after the birthday candles had been blown out and the party decorations put away. In the quiet of that peaceful evening, with Rex sleeping peacefully beside her bed and her family safe in their home, Emma Rodriguez drifted off to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to use her voice for good, and that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would never have to face them alone. The extraordinary partnership between a traumatized child and a therapy dog had become something even more beautiful, a lasting friendship that continued to prove that the most powerful healing comes through love, patience, and the simple act of refusing to give up on someone who needs to be heard.